Doctors have been concerned for a long time about people Googling their symptoms. There's this term, Dr. Google, which is really frustrating to a lot of physicians because people come in and think that they know what they have without having the actual expertise or context, just by having looked up, "I have a headache." What does it mean? GPT software is much better at actually being accurate in determining what patients have and asking sometimes follow-up questions that will help it further hone in on the correct diagnosis. Companies are starting to study this, and preliminary research suggests the ICE are surprisingly accurate. Studies have shown that they work better than online symptom checkers, which are websites that let you input your symptoms and spit out a diagnosis. They're also better than some untrained humans. So, what is quantum mechanics? Even though it was discovered by physicists, it's not a physical theory in the same sense as electromagnetism or general relativity. In the usual hierarchy of sciences, with biology at the top, then chemistry, then physics, then maths, quantum mechanics sits at a level between maths and physics that I don't know a good name for. Basically, quantum mechanics is the operating system that other physical theories run on as application software, with the exception of general relativity, which hasn't yet been successfully ported to this particular OS.
I think that's not going to be such a viable option for Cerberus, but that may be the way that they're going to approach it. Private equity, of course, is supposed to have the advantage of taking management out of the spotlight of quarterly profits and industry analysts and prying shareholder eyes, and that hypothetically gives them a chance to take slower, more patient routes to doing something to turn a company around. I would hope, and I have some, I guess, optimism that some of the Cerberus team will have some creativity and imagination.
As I was saying, Professor Mitchell.
Oh, please call me Lisa.
Yes, well, Lisa, I'm still trying to get my head around the choice of electives for the optional part of the third-year program. I was thinking of taking personal taxation law and company tax, together with the extra 5-credit point course on goods and services and VAT-type taxes, but I'm a bit concerned that I'm going to pigeonhole myself too early in the course.
Yeah,
As you know, there are going to be interviews for summer clerkships coming up, and I really don't want to come across as too focused on certain areas that a lot of firms don't even do, have a practice in.
Well, don't forget, only about 25% of the course at this stage is elective-based, and you'll still have that core of subjects: crim, legal institutions, evidence, property law, general commercial and Fed Con law, all of which would be of interest to a lot of firms. So if I were you, which I'm not, I'd really just go with what my interests are and enjoy the chance to undertake some work in an area that I'm motivated to pursue, don't you think? There's an awful lot of time in this profession where you'll be undertaking long, stressful hours on projects that don't really interest you as much.
Some years ago, Bjorn Lomborg, a young Danish statistician, published a book called The Skeptical Environmentalist. It became a bestseller and generated a lot of heat. Lomborg was attacked, abused, and accused of all manner of things, not because he denied the fact of global warming, in fact he affirmed it, but because, on his analysis, the devil and, he says, a lot of deviousness was contained in the details presented concerning the size of the problem and what were the most responsible steps to take in response to global warming. Two decades ago, Kashmiri houseboat owners rubbed their hands every spring at the prospect of the annual influx of tourists. From May to October, the hyacinth-choked waters of Dal Lake saw flotillas of vividly painted shikaras carrying Indian families, boho Westerners, young travelers, and wide-eyed Japanese. Carpet sellers honed their skills, as did purveyors of anything remotely embroidered, while the houseboats initiated by the British Raj provided unusual accommodation. Any foreigners venturing there risked their lives, proved in 1995 when 5 young Europeans were kidnapped and murdered.
The growth of the modern state brought with it the development of mass political parties and the emergence of professional politicians. A man whose occupation is the struggle for political power may go about it in 2 ways. First, a person who relies on their political activities to supply their main source of income is said to live off politics, while a person who engages in full-time political activities but who doesn't receive an income from it is said to live for politics. Now, a political system in which recruitment to positions of power is filled by those who live for politics is necessarily drawn from a property-owning elite who are not usually entrepreneurs. However, this is not to imply that such politicians will necessarily pursue policies which are wholly biased towards the interests of the class they originate from.
Patients with type 2 diabetes should start taking statins, the cholesterol-fighting drugs, as a preventative measure against heart disease, whether or not they have high cholesterol levels, according to new guidelines released yesterday. The recommendations from the American College of Physicians call for moderate doses of statins by people with diabetes who are older than 55, and for younger patients who have any other risk factors for heart disease, like high blood pressure or history of smoking. The new guidelines are outlined in April 20th issue of the Annals of Internal Medicine, in an article that noted that about 16 million Americans have type 2 diabetes, and that 800,000 new cases are diagnosed every year. The lead author of an article accompanying the guidelines, Dr. Sandeep Vijan of the University of Michigan, said that almost everyone with type 2 diabetes should be on a statin. The average age at diagnosis is 48, and even many patients under 55 have high blood pressure as well as diabetes, he said. Traditionally, diabetes treatment has focused on regulating blood sugar levels by careful control of diet or through insulin injections. But researchers have come to understand that control sugar really protects only against the destruction of small blood vessels, which can lead to blindness or loss of fingers, toes, or limbs. Heart disease is, in fact, the more serious threat. Up to 80% of diabetes patients will develop heart problems or die of them, the article said.
In its short life, the Internet has become an agent of revolutionary change and is one of the fastest tools to promote and defend freedom and to facilitate democratic access to information and knowledge. It has emerged as one of today's greatest instruments of progress and has gradually become a part of the vital infrastructure of global social, economic, cultural, and political life. The Internet's effect on our lives is pervasive. Over the past decade, the use of email, the web, and blogs have become part of the daily routine of more than 1 billion Internet users. Today, the Internet access touchpoints have outgrown the traditional PC-based Internet browsers, Internet Explorer, Firefox, to desktop applications, mobile phones, and satellite navigational devices in vehicles and living rooms. More and more people are buying movie tickets, air tickets, travel packages, railway tickets, and paying bills online. Online gaming is projected to increase by 141% by 2011 in the Asia-Pacific region, and mobile gaming to increase by 119% by a leading gaming industry. Very soon, we will see the dawn of the video age, when video will be used for buying, communicating, learning, and socializing. Online chat and blogs are reducing the gap between private and public life of the present generation. Cyber cafes have taken over pubs and bars for socializing, in spite of the opposing forces of regional borders, copyright, censorship, network blocking, etc. The proportion of greenhouse gases has increased significantly since the Industrial Revolution. Humans began burning fossil fuels, particularly coal, in a big way to drive steam engines for industry and generate electricity. In addition to escalating coal use after the Industrial Revolution, there came the widespread use of another fossil fuel, petroleum for transport. At the beginning of the 20th century, annual global oil output was about 150 million barrels of oil. Now, that amount is extracted globally in just 2 days. Fossil fuels are classed as non-renewable sources of energy, formed from decayed plants and animals over hundreds of millions of years. Burning fossil fuels releases billions of tons of carbon dioxide that has been locked away in the earth for millions of years. Humans are adding billions of tons of carbon dioxide to the atmosphere each year. And guess what? Carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas. The rate at which the planet is warming is possibly the biggest challenge to ever face humanity. The impacts are likely to be devastating. We need to act decisively and act now. A single web page cannot fully answer the question of what global warming is. Following the links on this page will allow you to see how complex and serious the issue of global warming is. So, what is global warming? It is a disaster of our own making. In years past, doctors were afraid to let heart patients exercise. When my father had a heart attack in 1968, he was kept sedentary for 6 weeks. Now, heart attack patients are in bed barely half a day before they're up and moving. Dr. Moffat said, "The core of cardiac rehab is a progressive exercise program to increase the ability of the heart to pump oxygen and nutrient-rich blood more effectively throughout the body. The outcome is better endurance, greater ability to enjoy life, and decreased mortality. The same goes for patients with congestive heart failure. Heart failure patients as old as 91 can increase their oxygen consumption significantly," Dr. Moffat said. Aerobic exercise lowers blood pressure in people with hypertension, and it improves peripheral circulation in people who develop cramping leg pains when they walk, a condition called intermittent claudication. The treatment for it, in fact, is to walk a little farther each day. In people who have had transient ischemic attacks or mini-strokes, gradually increasing exercise improves blood flow to the brain and may diminish the risk of a full-blown stroke, Dr. Moffat said, and aerobic and strength exercises have been shown to improve endurance, walking speed, and the ability to perform tasks of daily living up to 6 years after a stroke. As Randy knows, moderate exercise cuts the risk of developing diabetes. And for those with diabetes, exercise improves glucose tolerance. Less medication is needed to control blood sugar and reduces the risk of life-threatening complications. Despite a drumbeat of bad economic news, the stock market is up almost 11% in the last few weeks. Junk bonds, those risky corporate IOUs, are rallying. The value of financial shares, bank loans, tricky credit derivatives, up, up, up. Many on Wall Street, the epicenter of the credit mess, seem to think that the worst is over. For the first time in months, analysts and executives sound upbeat again. Many of them see a broad, sustained recovery in both the economy and the financial markets coming in the second half of this year, a prediction some market strategists call hopeful at best. For now, policymakers are echoing the mood on Wall Street. Treasury Secretary Henry M. Paulson Jr. said in an interview with Bloomberg Television on Thursday that we're closer to the end of this problem than we are to the beginning. A report from the Bank of England, meantime, concluded that mortgage securities, which have been at the heart of the financial troubles, probably have fallen too far. The central bank said prices of such securities should improve gradually in the coming months. Financial stocks and the broader market surged on Thursday as the dollar strengthened and oil prices fell for the third day in a row. The Standard & Poor's 500 stock index closed up 1.7% to 1,409.34 points. The Dow Jones Industrial Average notched a 189.87 point gain to 13,010, and the Nasdaq Composite jumped 2.8%. Another day or two like that, and those market benchmarks will be in the black for the year.
The holiday of Valentine's Day probably derives its origins from the ancient Roman feast of Lupercalia. In the early days of Rome, fierce wolves roamed the woods nearby. The Romans called upon one of their gods, Lupercus, to keep the wolves away. A festival held in honor of Lupercus was celebrated on February 15th. The festival was celebrated as a spring festival. Their calendar was different at that time, with February falling in early springtime. One of the customs of the young people was name drawing. On the eve of the festival of Lupercalia, the names of the Roman girls were written on slips of paper and placed into jars. Each young man drew a slip. The girl whose name was chosen was to be his sweetheart for the year. Legend has it that the holiday became Valentine's Day after a priest named Valentine. Valentine was a priest in Rome at the time Christianity was a new religion. The emperor at that time, Claudius II, ordered the Roman soldiers not to marry or become engaged. Claudius believed that as married men, his soldiers would want to stay home with their families rather than fight his wars. Valentine defied the emperor's decree and secretly married the young couples. He was eventually arrested, imprisoned, and put to death. Valentine was beheaded on February 14th, the eve of the Roman holiday Lupercalia.
He, about the same time, was so much displeased with the performances of a nobleman's French cook that he exclaimed with vehemence, "I'd throw such a rascal into the river." And he then proceeded to alarm a lady at whose house he was to sup, by the following manifesto of his skill. "I, madam, who live at a variety of good tables, am a much better judge of cookery than any person who has a very tolerable cook, but lives much at home, for his palate is gradually adapted to the taste of his cook. Whereas, madam, in trying by a wider range, I can more exquisitely judge." When invited to dine, even with an intimate friend, he was not pleased if something better than a plain dinner was not prepared for him. I have heard him say on such an occasion, "This was a good dinner enough to be sure, but it was not a dinner to ask a man to." On the other hand, he was wont to express, with great glee, his satisfaction when he had been entertained quite to his mind. When at table, he was totally absorbed in the business of the moment. His looks seemed riveted to his plate, nor would he, unless when in very high company, say one word, or even pay the least attention to what was said by others, till he had satisfied his appetite, which was so fierce, and indulged with such intenseness, that while in the act of eating, the veins of his forehead swelled, and generally a strong perspiration was visible. To those whose sensations were delicate, this could not but be disgusting, and it was doubtless not very suitable to the character of a philosopher who should be distinguished by self-command. But it must be owned that Johnson, though he could be rigidly abstemious, was not a temperate man either in eating or drinking. He could refrain, but he could not use moderately. He told me that he had fasted 2 days without inconvenience, and that he had never been hungry.
So in a very important tense, memory is the cognitive function that stores knowledge that we've acquired through learning and perception, but also memory is important because memory frees our behavior from being controlled by the present stimulus environment. If you didn't have memory, all you'd be able to do was react to whatever is currently in the environment now, whatever it is that you're experiencing. But memory allows us to respond to past events as well as events in the current stimulus environment. And memory also gives us the means to reflect on our experiences so that we plan for future encounters.